Bo, what do you think about what has happened in the last 24, 48 hours with Cleveland, and what's that mean maybe for LeBron James' future, if anything?
I just don't understand Dan Gilbert and how he operates. This doesn't seem like a good time for you to be bringing in a general manager to learn on the fly. Right? Like, hey, so you probably got 1 year left of LeBron James. Boston's out here making these moves. You got to retool to get up with the Warriors. Yeah, perfect time to get a general manager who's never done this job before. And I just can't figure out how this winds up being the move. I don't think you can make any argument against the fact that Griffin did a good job while he was there. So I don't get it, but I guess, my network has been running this number that's pretty fascinating. Dan Gilbert hadn't re-upped on a general manager yet, not once.
LeBron's gone through some GMs and some coaches here, and then I wonder, and I said this yesterday, and I was probably in the minority, but now with David Griffin fired, I just don't see LeBron ending his career in Cleveland. I think he gave them the championship, and it feels like what he does next might be just to have fun playing basketball. Maybe it's going to Los Angeles for business reasons. I'm not sure. It just doesn't feel like he and Dan Gilbert are ever going to be best buddies with this.
No, he don't even call that dude by name, right? Like, if you saw that podcast from the barbershop with Draymond Green where he referred to him as the guy who owned the team at the time, right? Like, I ain't seen this level of open acrimony since Shine got out of jail and was calling Puffy dude, right? And Shine Puffy got Shine sent to jail, and he was calling him dude. That's how LeBron James deals and talks about Dan Gilbert. So I was talking to somebody a couple weeks ago about this where I was like, I heard a few months ago that LeBron is looking to go to Los Angeles, and the way this game works, if it gets to the point where I heard it, I ain't the only one who heard it, right? Like I'm not at the top of the telephone tree on these sorts of things. So I was talking to a guy, and I was like, so when are people going to start talking about the fact that they'd heard about LeBron in L.A.? I swear it was the next day we all decided to be like, okay, so we can be honest about the fact that we heard that LeBron is going to L.A. At this point, I'd be surprised if he stayed in Cleveland.
I was going to use the same Shine Puffy reference before you did. You beat me to that. But you know what's great about this leading into this draft? There's a whole lot of intrigue involving a whole lot of teams, and it all starts and finishes with Golden State. Like LeBron, Golden State's in everybody's head now. Whatever you're going to do, if you want to compete with us for the next couple of years, all right, let's see what you got. And it just feels like there's going to be desperate measures here by teams.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of teams, though, are trying to position themselves for when this Golden State thing kind of tapers off because they're so far away from being able to compete. Now, everything Cleveland has done for the better part of the last 2 years has been about trying to compete with Golden State. And, there's nobody else for them to deal with. Like, that's the white whale that they have to be the ones chasing at this point. So, like, that one, I think, makes a certain measure of sense. Boston's in this odd position where you can't tell if they're playing for now, playing for later, or somehow they're going to try to do both. Right? Like, it's a crazy time in the league where everybody is trying to shoot for something that's so far away, so there are different ways to go about it and kind of different middle ground levels that I feel like that they wind up at where they decide, okay, well, this is what's going to satisfy us right now. And all of that leads to a draft that we're also excited about and we know has like 6 or 7 really good players that hardly any of us have ever watched play basketball.
Well, they're only there for 6 months to have them. How many people watched a full game of Markelle Fultz?
A full game? Like, I don't even know why we need to go that far. Like, the thing is, Markelle Fultz played on a team that won 9 games, and I don't even know if I can blame him for it. But they played on the West Coast. So, like, with Simmons, at least I did watch Simmons play. And to be honest, everyone had been telling us all year about Simmons. By the time I found out about Markelle Fultz, wasn't nobody putting them on TV? Like, it was going to take a lot more than Bill Walton calling the game for me to tune in to watch 9-win Washington, just because y'all say this dude is good.
But Lonzo Ball is going to be must-see TV, I think. Like, I think Magic, being a brilliant businessman, looks at this as, I've got a player who's going to play right away, and as a businessman, this is must-see TV. The Lakers become very, very interesting now just because of Lonzo Ball.
I also think that Magic is doing something that is kind of the blessing and curse of former player as executive. Because one thing that former players love to do as executives is get players that remind them of themselves, right? And he has been asked, is there any player in this draft that reminds you of you? And he says, yes, it's Lonzo Ball. They are all suckers for guys who remind them of themselves. And I got questions about Lonzo. Like, I don't know if he's, like, athleticism, I have questions. That funny-looking jumper, I've got questions about. And watching De'Aaron Fox light him up 2 times doesn't make you feel better about him necessarily. But Magic, I don't know if Magic can pass up on some guy that reminds him so much of himself. You know, you look a lot. You remind me a lot of myself when I see you.
I love De'Aaron Fox.
I do too.
He's got attitude. He's the fastest guy in the draft. He played at a big program. I don't know. It feels like he's sort of not involved in the conversation, and it feels like he's destined to end up in Sacramento or something. But I do like him. I think he's a fun kid to watch.
And he's from Houston, which, those of us who are from Houston can tell
okay.
you
Is that what it is?
Positive.
That's what it is.
Positive.
That's what it is. He's Bomani Jones from the Mothership joining us, Dan Patrick Show. A couple other things here. The Kaepernick conversation continues. Is the coverage interesting to you of like it almost feels like there's a story, but then there's the coverage of the story. What's more interesting?
That's a good question. I think the coverage of the story has its own level of interest because, all right, so we're at a point now where I just don't feel like anybody can honestly and sincerely say that Kaepernick is not capable of playing in the NFL. I just don't think you can. I think you can look at some of these scrubs that have gotten contracts, and it's hard to make the argument that Kaepernick has no business in the league. Now, on the other hand, I do agree with those who raise the question as to whether or not he's really doing a service for himself by being so silent at this point. Like, at this point, I feel like you got to go do an interview and say, look, this is what has happened, this is what has not happened, so forth and so on, because the questions and everything get so loud where if you're not saying anything, then what everybody's just left to their own devices, and I don't think that he can afford to leave people at their own devices anymore. I just find myself frustrated because if you want to make the argument that he can't play in the NFL, that's fine. Like, this is the 21st century. Get on the internet, put out some GIFs, and explain to us why it is that he's not capable of playing the NFL. But all the guys I know who do go on the internet and put out the GIFs of the film all say that he can play. So, like, what's going on from these people on the other side? And I don't know why so many people are so invested in just dismissing the idea that maybe, just maybe, the league is making a decision to teach him a lesson, as though that's such a, like, ridiculous idea that somebody would do. No, it's totally possible that could happen. But I think it's impossible to make the argument that he's simply incapable of playing NFL football.
Well, I look at Kaepernick, and the situation I find fascinating. It just feels like everybody's got their personal beliefs, and then they inject it into this story, and then Kaepernick will sign with some team, and nobody's going to care about Kaepernick after that. I do think he has to get out in front of this. I don't think he's helped himself at all. I'd love to know, do you think you're a starter? Are you willing to be a backup? Is location going to be an issue here? Are you healthy? These are just generic questions that I would have for him if I was interested in him, let alone, doing a talk show. But until he says that, then I think he's made it murkier. He's made it more of a mystery than it already should be. And I think that's a disservice to him.
I do agree there, but I would also make the argument on the other side that these are all pieces of information that NFL teams could probably easily find out with phone calls that they're not making. And the most damning thing in this remains that, as far as anybody can tell, they're not even calling to find out at the scarcest position in professional sports.
Yeah, I would bring him in. I thought if I'm the Browns, I would have brought him in. If you think Deshaun Kaiser is your future, I'd bring in Kaepernick or the Jets or some of the as a starter. As a backup, I don't know. You have to sort of cater your offense, or he has to fit in with that. Like Seattle would have been great, I think, because of the offense. But I don't know what the politics of the drama behind the scenes. But I still think he can play, and I would take a chance on him. But, I'm probably in the minority.
I disagree with the argument about having to tailor the offense to the backup quarterback. And the reason I say that is 3 different teams signed Michael Vick to be backup quarterback, right, who had every single flag and tag that we have about Kaepernick, that people throw out there about Kaepernick, about running your offense and fit and everything else. 3 different teams decided to sign him after he was, and 2 of them after he was getting older and breaking down. So, like, Derek Anderson is Cam Newton's backup. They ain't tailoring no offense, no damn Derek Anderson, and he still has a job.
But Derek Anderson can play in a pro set.
Right, but the argument is that you have to tailor whatever it is that you're doing. You have to have a backup that plays the same kind of game as your starter, because otherwise you have to change everything when the backup comes in. But they have no problem changing everything when Derek Anderson comes in, right? That's why I say that argument that, well, we'd have to tailor the offense around the backup, and who wants to do that? No, I don't really buy that, because I guess I've seen over our lives, we've seen too many quarterbacks who aren't like the guy who starts over them.
Yeah, but it feels like if you bring him in as a starter, you may be changing your entire offense because of Colin Kaepernick. If he's the backup, I understand if he comes in and plays that maybe you're not changing much at all. But if you bring him into the Browns, are you a different offense? Is your mindset different for Hugh Jackson because Kaepernick's there as opposed to starting, Brock Osweiler?
Yeah, I think there's something to that, but I'd also say as much as people want to knock Kaepernick and like how complex an offense you can run, how complex an offense can you run for Cody Kessler or Brock Osweiler, for example, right? Like I'd like to think that NFL coaches should be able to be flexible enough to be like, okay, we got a different player, well, we're going to do things a little bit differently as opposed to we do this one way only.
Where do you your reaction to what Tiger had to say yesterday through his agent that he needs help for his pain meds?
Well, good for him. I mean, I think that was abundantly clear once you saw the video. Like, generally speaking, once you get pulled over, tanked while driving a car, that's typically the sign that, okay, something is not right here. And so for him to say, okay, I've got a problem, I think that there's something to. And all you could do in a situation like this is hope that the dude gets better because he doesn't want it to be this way, right? Like, it's like, I don't think he started taking the painkillers for kicks. He started taking the painkillers for pain. And then it goes from there. And I think those things get unwieldy and out of people's control in a lot of ways, just like alcohol gets out of people's control in a lot of ways when they're struggling and, for different reasons. So I just hope he winds up being okay. That's all you can ask for in a case like that.
You got a new show coming up?
I do. Starting in January, me and Pablo Torre are going to do a show that as of yet doesn't have a name format or anything else, but we're going to do it, damn it.
Wait, is it just a TV-only show?
It is a TV-only show, at least as far as I know. We're going to do it 12 to 1 Eastern starting January the 2nd on ESPN, and I got to say, I'm kind of thrilled.
Wow. Why don't you just call it the No Name Show? Or remember what was it, America gave us the horse with no name? It's the show with no name.
I have to say, if we did that, it would probably be safer than any name that Pablo and I would come up with, right? Like that I do. I think that if you gave like the whole list of things that he and I would say, and then we come up with a show with no name, I can't imagine how quickly the bosses would be like, yeah, show with no name. That's the one that works.
Thank you, Bo. Good to talk to you again.
No problem, man. You guys have a good one.
That's Bomani Jones from the Mothership.
The Dan Patrick Show, weekday mornings on Audience.